Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News.
Over time, the problems facing Nigeria's power sector have to a large extent become endemic, and despite various attempts by successive administrations at evolving an enduring solution, it continues to be a source of frustration to the paying public. For a more detailed look at this, we are now being joined by Beks Dagogo-Jack, a civil engineer, technocrat, and public servant, who also served as chairman of the Presidential Task Force on Power. Welcome to the program, sir. Good morning.
Engineer Dagogo-Jack, welcome to the morning show.
Good morning.
It's good to see you again after such a long time. Yes, good to see you. Now, I mean,
thank you, Ruben.
Yes,
thank you, Ruben.
Yes, good to see you. From about 2010, you were, part of the team and later chairman of the Presidential Task Force, put in place by President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan to onboard the PACN to oversee the power sector reform program of that administration. But the Buhari administration succeeded the Jonathan administration, and the power sector crisis has not disappeared. And, we keep being told, we're always told that, the Jonathan administration didn't do the right thing. And, that the power sector crisis persists because your team, in unbundling PACN and in putting all the framework in place, played politics rather than focusing on the technocratic indications. Do you stand guilty as charged?
Nice way to put it. No, I don't. But even more particularly, I'd like Nigerians to understand that we needed to reform the power sector. It was an urgency that is resonating with us even now as we speak. And again, it will be wrong to locate the origin of that effort with the Jonathan administration. It started with the Obasanjo administration. He took the bulls by the horn. He set up the EPSR, which is the Electricity Power Sector Reform Act, in 2005, and put the enabling environment, enabling funding to embark on the project. And government being a continuum, the next administration, which was the Yar'Adua Goodluck administration, went to look at what happened there, which is a judicious thing to do. And later on, the Goodluck administration took up from there and fired on to where we handed over the sector to the private sector, the vertically integrated government monopoly to the private sector. So I think it was the right thing to do.
Well, we can all agree, though, whether it was the right thing to do or not, the privatization process has not lived up to expectations in terms of service delivery. What is your take on the calls for review of the agreements between the federal government and the 5 GENCOs and 11 DISCOs?
Yeah. As you know, privatization is not a snapshot. It is not a sprint. It is a long distance race. It has components of it. It has several moving parts, and toying with one moving part has a consequent effect on the other moving parts and the eventual outcome. So it's a very sensitive process wherever it has been unleashed or rolled out. There is no country that has privatized that it turned out to be the most beautiful wedding of the century. It has never been so. It is full of hiccups. But that is why there are human beings, there are structures, there are institutions designed to manage it through the nurturing phase to maturity. And again, with respect to your question, every agreement is not cast in stone, so it must be constantly reviewed. If the government wants to review the context of the agreement, they have a right so to do. Don't forget, they are still a strong equity participant in most of those deals. And they are still the federal government, the overriding client, if you like, so far as the relationships are concerned. So the federal government has a right to sit with the market participants, the licensees, and begin to reshape, renegotiate the contracts.
Absolutely, sir. What areas would you suggest or would you recommend should be a priority when the review takes place?
From where I stand, I think we shouldn't be talking about knee-jerk reactions. We should look at a complete holistic resetting of the market. The market is run out of equilibrium or discipline or order, if you like. So to reset it, you don't need to pinpoint knee-jerk actions here and there, because they will end up further complicating the process.
No,
so what I would have liked is for us to sit, come again, sorry.
To be specific.
For us to sit together and design it. For instance, I have ideas. If you want to reset this market, you have to start from the downstream, which is the distribution companies. You have to make that work, because that is where the money comes into the market from. Well, you have to go to the midstream, and the midstream has two components, transmission and the gas component. You have to get both working. If you get these two working, generation is fully incentivized to fix their assets, to maintain their assets, to build more capacity, because they will not build capacity and just let it idle in the plants. They want to sell power. Well, if the system is not right, they can't sell power. If they sell power, they can't get their money, they won't sell power.
Beks, to be specific, the Vice President said recently that one option that the federal government is considering is paying off the investors in the distribution companies to the tune of about maybe 700 billion. Pay them off and then take another look and reassign the distribution companies. Because in the view of the Vice President, these distribution companies, they've not been able to meet up with generation capacity, and it's better that the assets are handed over to people who can perform better. Do you think that this is a good proposition?
First, I want to say I've not seen that in the news, so
no, it's been in the news. I'm reporting it to you.
Account of it.
Yes.
Okay, good. That being so, I would say, as somebody who is involved, who studied the system for a while, that would be a very grave mistake. Because let's not forget that at the time when we needed to move our sector forward through the privatization agenda, these were the people that were in play. These were the people that were ready to partner with us and make that dream happen. They are not perfect. Some of their challenges cannot be located with them. Some are located with them. Some are outside their capacity to manage. But so when you said the government will sit down and renegotiate, I bought that concept. But if government wants to throw them out and start it all over again, I can tell you that not only is it wrong, it is likely to dip our electricity supply to below the 1,000 megawatts for many months or years, if not careful.
Okay, you mentioned earlier the EPSR of 2005, the act that you said was implemented under the Obasanjo regime. And in that, you mentioned that this is an act that also pushes to create an enabling environment for investors. Now, we have this new deal coming in with Siemens to produce 20,000 megawatts of electricity by 2020. My fear, or the fear of the public as well, is that if we do not create an enabling environment for Siemens, this could be a deal that goes very sour or very left before the time that we actually need it to last for. So what is your take on this? How can we start to make sure that we're creating this enabling environment so they're not just going to come in and go right out the back door and never come back again, leaving us where we are now in terms of our power generation?
Very good question. And I know it has a lot of merit coming from somebody who is desirous of solving the problem. I've also thought through the situation. I've not seen the project documents. I don't know how the contract was designed. But the spirit behind the contract or the project or the initiative makes sense to me. I know that Siemens is a very strong brand. They've had projects here that didn't go too well, and people can latch onto that and begin to say negative things. But it is an international brand that has reputation. Going forward, your concern is my concern as well. Typically, when a project is rolled out, Nigerians are looking at the projects from the angles of where it pays them or doesn't pay them. And as soon as they make those conclusions, they can abandon the baby with the bathwater. That could be a danger going forward. So government can proact there by putting in place a mechanism that protects that initiative from being taken over, if you like, disrupted by many forces, bureaucratic, competitive market forces, contractor interests. There are so many things that can come into play, but you need to have some kind of structure in place that protects this project on no return. I totally agree with you.
Well, under your watch, the government...
we should do something. We can't do nothing.
Under your watch, the government put in place a multi-year tariff order to be managed under the electricity reform framework. Now, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, we're told that by January 2020, there's going to be an upward review of tariffs. But the electricity consumer is complaining about the absence of meters. Yes, there was this MAP initiative to provide meters, but that has not really had as much impact as would be expected. And now we're being told that there will be an increase in tariffs under the regime of estimated billing, and dissatisfaction on the part of electricity consumers. What do you think should come first? Metering or this increase in tariffs that may just be a sop for the distribution companies?
Yeah. Ruben, I also would like to ask you, probably jokingly, but what would you like to have first, the chicken or the egg?
No, I would like to have...
We are in that particular environment.
No, I would like to have the proper metering first. For
as a citizen, I think we all would.
To have meters so that there will be proper assessment rather than estimated billing.
Estimated billing is a scandal.
Yeah. It's such a scam.
Anyway, Engineer Dagogo-Jack, we'll take a short break and then we'll come back and you can respond to the question. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Okay.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Still with us in our Abuja studio is Engineer Beks Dagogo-Jack, a civil engineer, technocrat, public servant who also served as chairman of the Presidential Task Force on Power under the Goodluck Jonathan administration in Nigeria, 2010 to 2015. Engineer Dagogo-Jack, I had asked you a question about the proposed review of tariffs by the NERC, the Electricity Regulatory Commission in Nigeria, and whether this should be the first thing to think about at this point when people are complaining about estimated billing, disruption in services, and lack of efficiency on the part of the distribution companies.
Yes, thank you. I want to say a few things, and we can get my feel on it from those things I say. Number one, tariff has two principal objectives. Number one is to make sure that it is cost reflective. So the market can be sustainable. Number two is that it makes sure people pay for services delivered relative to capacity. I'm using a generic term. So, but currently, and even in the last exercise, I hope this will be changed going forward, we see in the order an inability to charge people the fair tariff. There are people who are paying tariffs that are too low for the level of consumption. Somebody living in Lugbe with a 5-bedroom house and 6 ACs and 4 TVs is paying the same rate as the person who lives in a 1-room apartment. Technology has given us a lot of tools to make changes in that direction. So the next make people pay based on their capacity to pay. That is an underlying equity principle in tariff design. So if you have more capacity to pay, you have to pay more. For instance, there are a lot of people who are sleeping in darkness because they cannot afford a generating set. But if you can afford a generating set, you must pay more when there is electricity than the person who can afford to sleep in darkness. We haven't brought in that element in the tariff design. I would like that. Metering, estimated billing is illegal. There is nowhere in an electricity market where it has a place. It doesn't have a place in the market. So, but I can tell you that some of the discos have hidden incentives to sustain that model. It is beneficial to their bottom lines in a way that will not create a transparent market for everybody. So when some people get very angry with the discos, these are some of the things that make them get angry. But it's not enough to throw the baby with the bathwater. You have to sit with them and make things happen. But I can tell you that estimated billing is evil in the market and it should be treated as such. Metering cannot happen overnight. Metering is investment driven. So there must be an investment model that incentivizes metering, that creates metering, makes metering possible for every disco. Once you've made that possible, you make it illegal for the disco to have estimated billing, and you begin to match the times from when you made metering possible to when you must ebb out from estimated billing. Then you introduce the enabling environment, I mean in terms of sanctioning, in terms of NEC's ability to catch people doing these things and make them pay for it in the eyes of the public. So these components must all be working efficiently and effectively for you to now predict what the future of the market will look like. But for as long as NEC is lax in terms of how they drive the metering agenda and they think that is a disco responsibility, it will never happen. For as long as the federal government, who is the eventual beneficiary politically if everybody has light, also treats metering as if it's a responsibility of the disco, we will never get to that threshold where everybody is behaving normally. So to that extent, people must own metering as a common challenge, and everybody must be on the table to see how metering will become normal in Nigeria and estimated billing will become abnormal in Nigeria. We need to get to that point, and then we can see a different market unfolding. Thank you.
Amen. I read a recent report that said that Nigeria is unable to access $5.2 billion from the World Bank and some of their development partners because of poor market conditions, which are probably some of the things you've just described, and also inability to correct certain corporate governance issues within the power sector. So my question for you is do you think that this is what has informed the unbundling, since we've used that word earlier, of that super ministry under Honorable Minister Fashola, that now the power sector stands alone as its own ministry? And what do you make of Saleh Maman's first comment, public comment as Minister for Power, which was to ask for the prayers of Nigerians, and as well as his Minister for State, who is Godi Jedi Agba, who, based on his screening, was more expected to have ended up as Minister of State for Petroleum?
Yeah, you don't think that it is elegant for me to get into discussions like that, because they will not address the sector going forward. We will just add shades of opinion to something that is largely about the opinion of people on other people. I'm not that good in that realm. But I know that it is proper to decouple the Ministry of Power from the former setting. I know that it was proper so to do, because we have gone to market. A government does not own the business as it owns, say, housing, which it does not even own as much as and people think it does. So once you begin to show like you own the power sector, one government shows like that, what happens? Private capital goes back. It says, man, this is not a safe environment for us to do business. But now, once you've said it is standing alone, and you now raise the image and capacity of the regulator at par or even slightly higher than the Ministry of Power, insofar as the market is concerned. Everybody knows who the sectorial boss is. But we're not talking about sectorial bossing. We're talking about driving a market. We're talking about building new projects in the power sector. So you don't want to, people shouldn't be looking at the Ministry of Power when they're thinking of building more electricity projects. They should be looking at the regulator and the landscape, the market landscape, where the opportunities exist. So we change the narrative by bundling up all those ministries in one and giving an impression that there is not enough faith in the privatization process. That hurt us. I think that there's a sense that we want to correct it going forward.
Okay, now you mentioned that we need an investment model that incentivizes metering in order for us to get that structure up and running, because it's not as black and white as us, the public, may think. Now, yesterday we had Professor Kingsley Moghalu on the show with us, the ex-deputy governor of the CBN, and he said that his general problem with this new cabinet is that it is such a political cabinet that it scares investors away. The cabinet is not full of technocrats like yourself. It's not full of people who can actually add value and bring investors in. So his fear is that investors are going to be scared away. So can we really expect much investment going towards the notion of metering? Or can we just say that really and truly, we're not going to get that investment for metering, so let's not really deceive the public. We may not see metering around in Nigeria for quite a while.
Yeah, okay, see, first and foremost, the president has his prerogatives and his powers. He can exercise it. You are right. Whatever decision he takes has an immediate impact by way of interpretation by different stakeholders, and there will be challenge thereafter to deal with. I also want to say, quite honestly, that the president is not going to run for office in 2023. You know that most of the people that have been selected to the ministry are politicians, and probably they have more stake than the president, because they probably will run for this or run for that in 2023. I'm thinking that if you're hoping to run for something, we should begin to run for something on the basis of some performance. We should just leave the history of running for something and even winning something with nothing that people can hold and touch. We've had to do that a lot. There's enough blame to throw around, but I think from 1999, most of us, much younger then, had hoped that some kind of model will be put in place where there's a correlation between office capacity and expectation, and all that will be a narrative that keeps going on from one government to the other to the benefit of everybody. But once politics and personalities and if you like, structures, what I call political structures, a group of people, a euphemism for if you like, extreme power mongering, it became a culture. It has almost perfected itself, and we have to do things differently to shift it away and bring back the order of relating to the grassroots, relating to the social issues that throw up leadership. We have to get that right. Yes. Well, that could be a gist for another time, but really, I'm interested in power sector right now.
Well, Engineer Dagogo-Jack will go to a break shortly, but before then, I have a question for you. You must have been following the controversy over the judgment by the British Commercial Court in the matter between process and industrial development and the Nigerian government. But we'll take a break, and then when we come back, I would articulate the question. You're still watching The Morning Show here on Arise News, and still with us in our Abuja studio is Engineer Beks Dagogo-Jack, former chairman of the Presidential Task Force on Power in Nigeria, and he's been responding to a number of questions about the power sector in Nigeria. Engineer Dagogo-Jack, before we went on break, I brought up the issue of the matter between Process and Industrial Development Limited and the Federal Republic of Nigeria before the Court of Justice Christopher Butcher in the United Kingdom. Now, you were part of the reform of the power sector from 2010 to 2015. And before you opted to run for office and, you left government, you were also in charge of the gas to power project under the Jonathan administration. And this particular matter in the United Kingdom is about gas to power and how government failed in addressing that. What's your take? What do you know? What went wrong? Why didn't government succeed in seeing that, initiative through? Something that many Nigerians have said, if it had worked, it would have helped.
Not a lot, because I believe the contract probably even got sour by the time we were in the groove, so to speak. So there are elements of it that were already blanked out so far as our own process was concerned. It was already made up in the courts or something like this. But on a broader level, I want to pinpoint that, number one, the way contracts are developed needs to be reviewed. Is that know their rights, that have capacity to follow through on their rights. You don't presume that sense that you are federal government and you cannot be hurt. So the way the ministries of justice attached to these ministries, departments and agencies for making sure that we sign the right contracts, that's where to stop this damage. The second damage is the way we deal with projects. If we deal with projects without adequate funding, if we make commitments without adequate budgetary provisions, if we want to fund projects with 100% federal budgeting, instead of having a good portfolio mix where there is debt capital, there is equity, and then there is federal government, you have less stress on the same budget line. If we have no discipline in dealing with projects that we've committed to, and all of what I say, happens in our system. So some of these things, it's even possible that the agencies that came to deal with us knew upfront some of those weaknesses, and they were looking to get justice in the courts. So if you are not that organized, people will take advantage of you. That one is a universal fact. So I think we can use this to learn how we do things, especially from step one. What kind of contract relationships are you having with this contractor, agent, supplier, vendor, whatever? Where are the loopholes for you to suffer damage if this contract gets awry? What are the containment to make sure to minimize your risk and your exposure? If all of this was left open-ended, we can't be showing up with some kind of liability of $9 billion on our doorsteps. So a few things were wrong from our side. Even if the person is ambitious, is greedy, is fraudulent, you don't have to give him space to deliver those kind of blows on you. Yeah. That's my thought on it.
Yeah, but the current government is blaming the Jonathan administration for omissions, for failures, Do you think that is really the case? What's your response to that?
Yeah, for me, on a broader scale, we must, as a country, be able to decouple the time zone for politics from the time zone for governance and for national development. There are two time zones that are just next to each other, but you can't keep moving, talking as if you are still in politics when you already have a challenge of governance and development. So you want to take the bull by the horn. There is no government that can be an island of its own. It is always going to succeed somebody and also hand over to somebody. So there will always going to be administration issues. So you have to deal with it, and I don't think some of the people that speak on these issues do not have the mandate of government. That's my suspicion. And some of them are over-politicized. So everything they do must come down to... And Nigeria doesn't have to go through that route. We can have issues that we inherited, and we can have the boldness and courage to deal with it as best we can. And we can leave the public to judge us as to how well we have done it. That's just the way I think we should do things going forward.
Absolutely, sir.
Nigeria is an entity that should be owned.
It's quite a ruinously expensive lesson to learn. But still on government spending, President Buhari has just signed yet another, this time 600 billion naira intervention in the power sector. This is the third since 2013. We've had 213 billion in 2014 and 701 billion in 2017. What is your take on this and the perception in some quarters that the government is essentially propping up private companies?
I don't share that perception because, again, there must be a document trail. These are things that can be audited, that can be reviewed. So on the face of it, I don't share it. But I also want you to understand that we can, if we're not organized, we can throw good money to bad issues. So you can throw all that money at a system, but you're not getting the mileage because you didn't organize it properly. So, but that amount of money the system needs to go forward is a fact. As I speak with you, even if we looked at how much energy the federal government, its agencies, ministries, military, police, customs have taken off the electricity grid and not paid for, you will see a huge amount of money. So even if you're talking about balance sheet issues, really as a business, whatever the government puts into the sector to get it right is nothing to cry about, but it should be done in such a way that we know how much we're going to get out of it by way of improvement in our network, in our grid network, improvement in metering, improvement in collection, improvement in service delivery. So we can't just throw good money at issues that are not organized, and then they just fizzle out, come back to square one. We shouldn't do that. But the sector needs this amount of government interest and intervention until it stabilizes. It's not unique to us. It was done in India, Mexico, Brazil, everywhere that you transited the sector from typically very fraudulent and corrupt with zero service delivery regimes to one in which the market determines the quality of service. There is always a challenge to make that transition. And every government that makes a commitment to face that challenge have benefited in the long run. Thank you.
Okay, that's a fair point to make. This amount of money needs to be spent, you said. But I'd like to bring up the points of renewable energy as well. You are the former chairman of the Presidential Task Force on Power, and I want to know if under that position that you held, you took any efforts to really push Nigeria towards a renewable energy front. This is the 21st century, and I think another great concern is that while the entire world is moving towards renewable energy, and have been for a number of years, Nigeria is far from there. What efforts were made when you were in charge of this presidential task force? Do you know of any efforts also being made now? And what are the costing implications when it comes to renewable energy as a main source of energy in Nigeria for parts of the region?
I think renewable energy is an element in any wise portfolio design for energy mix. It's a wise tool, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, where we are blessed with a lot of sun resource, if you like. So it's all about project management. It's all about policy harmonization. It has a place in our market. It needs to be done properly. You need to deliver proof of concept, probably from a very smaller scale, build confidence around that scale, and begin to scale up. So it has to be done properly. You can have a place like Sokoto, which has almost 10 or 11 months of active sunlight in the year, and make a case. We can also localize that energy source for certain zones so that we take pressure off the grid. So for me, it's a mix of strategy and policy, and again, institutional arrangements, market arrangements. We can get that to be in our system without stress. When we were there, we met a situation where we're trying to transit government. We're also trying to make it happen under a program of relative service delivery performance. So we met the sector at about 2,000 megawatts. We left it about 4,500 in supply terms. But in equipment and capacity terms, it was way more than that when we left. But generally speaking, we were looking at getting what we have to work for us rather than becoming creative and running all over the place. But there was already a strong thinking about renewable energy at that time. There were policies that were being put in the works. So, and again, in this administration, there's been proof of concept in one area or the other using renewable. So we are in renewable, but we don't need to make it look as if that is the main thing. It's not the main thing. It has its own challenges, some of which are largely technical, largely skills-based, and you need to take it one step at a go. I know for how long the US has been trying to develop renewable to the point where it has a particular scope percentage in their energy mix, but it took a lot of money, a lot of risk investments.
Engineer Dagogo-Jack, I mean, after his inauguration as Minister of Power, Sally Maman, the new Minister of Power from Taraba State, his friends had an event for him, and at that event, he said the problems in the power sector are surmountable, although he didn't proffer ideas as to how he intends to solve those problems. But what kind of advice will you give him beyond government just throwing money at the problem, which you say may not necessarily be the solution? With the benefit of hindsight, as somebody who has been in that sector, what kind of recommendations will you make to the minister and also to the federal government?
I'd love to throw some ideas at him. First, he has to be very, very humble, so it allows you to know what is right, what is not right. He has to be very wise, and God gives wisdom, because a lot of people will throw ideas at you. A lot of people would say things just so you can feel good. A lot of data may not be credible that are being thrown around the place, so you have to be able to sieve through that dearth of information. He has to be a great time manager, because a system that is gone off track, you need all the time to yourself to be able to reset it. If you get into the mix of bureaucratic power play and all those kind of huge files all over the place and stuff like that, you can get lost in the maze. So he has to pull back and see how he goes about this. He has to have a technical team that he can trust to the last cent, that if these guys come back to him and say, do this, that is the right way to go. Because it's a very huge sector. It has a lot of layers and layers of technicians, technocrats. You have to be able to sieve out the functional team you can use to work. He must be thinking markets. If he's not thinking markets and he's thinking to reverse the privatization that has been done, he will meet his own challenges. I don't know how that will pan out, but he has to think market. He has to also learn very, very fast. The system is unforgiving because it's very dynamic. It's unforgiving for slow learning, so he has to learn very, very fast and do catch up. Then wow. I think we'll give him best wishes.
Well, thank you, Beks Dagogo-Jack. If I had my way, if I had a say in the matter, I would have recommended you as a Minister of Power. But thank you very much for the benefit of your intervention.
No problem.
Thank you very much.